Additionally, she was said to believe that by showing someone love, they would always be successful. However, she was mistaken this time. What Charlotte didn't understand that occasional conditions are so poisonous that regardless of how well you care for a snake, it will only spit forth a snake, not an egg. That was the situation in Prince Andrew's. She was just 21 years old when she entered the world of Prince Andrew, a world that promised imperial glitzels and the honor of serving in the royal family, but left her explaining her work instead as the one that no one desired. The cause was easy. Behind the gleaming exterior of a guy who lived in Buckingham Palace was the populace does not like the charming Duke of York, once thought of, but a person of his own employees publicly referred to arrogance, impolite, and deranged. During one of her interviews with she didn't spend time in reading the Daily Mail, she shared all of her thoughts. Andrew, I don't care what Prince says. Andrew senses he is a cruel, awful man. It wasn't someone's language attempting to soften her tone. It was Thethy, most unvarnished account of someone who had suffered humiliating treatment for years. Additionally, as her tales proliferate, the world eventually had an unvarnished look at Andrew's actual actions when there were no cameras. The Duke's recollections were of him as entitled, lethargic, and prone to anger. Andrew frequently yelled commands at her, account for things he could have completed on his own. One of his interests became curtains. Heavy drapes that hide the floor could be drawn by his own hand with ease, would instead in charge of brick. After leaving the smallest space, the error between them, if it could even be referred to as one, threw a fit. Andrew yelled as he rushed out of his office. Down the hallway, his voice resonating these foul language. Can't you do it? Is there anything correct? He yelled as Heath, a young maid, was moved to tears. It was so. Look at the power structure of the employees suffered every day. In Andrew's household, errors were not accepted, regardless of how insignificant. Each action carried its consequences of punishment. Briggs remembered going around the rooms with the ongoing anxiety about being observed. I did everything I could to get away from him. His presence he was much more irate. However, his anger was not the only thing that unnerved me. His peculiar needs, which were so demeaning and compulsive that they almost in the ridiculous. The most notorious centered on his assortment of plush animals. From the outside, it appeared like a grown man with a cute little quirk clinging to youth. To those it was a nightmare to maintain it. 72 teddy bears were owned by the Duke of York. Next to a plush hippo and Black Panther, insisting that they were planned with military accuracy. Nobody made contact them without direction. The laminated instructional documents described the positioning of every item, descending to which ought to take the rear position, which was where his two favorite bears should always sit on either side of his like sentinels in the bed. Briggs explained undergoing a full day of training on only this ritual. A mistake could set off one of Andrew's In fact, his bedroom looked like a temple to the frailty of himself. The monarch pillows with crest embroidery have two ideally positioned following the mattress was rotated. It was time to lay his pyjamas out with perfect symmetry. The overstuffed following their show. The animals were taken out prior to his bedtime, then came back at the break of day. Employees, Briggs included, frequently questioned what kind of this treatment was requested by the man, and what it intended for him. It wasn't a sluggish press. On this. Later it made use of thistles, creating a portrayal of an adult. The prince is stuck in an arrested development, in need of youthful maids to calm his temper and safeguard the integrity of his teddy bears. But for Briggs, it doesn't matter if you laugh. It resembled walking. Every day, she replied. On eggshells, the picture of a king who shed a few tears. Bears and curtains clashed harshly, using the charm he used in the general public. His encounters were even terrible alongside other servants. Briggs explained his treatment of palace employees as garbage, with little appreciation or civility, in contrast to Edward, Charles, and even she recalled Prince Philip, elegant and dignified. Andrew was in his own degree of wickedness. It's not as though she was fabricating these tales from her head. Other past employers held similar information. One ex-matter remembered having to hurry across this space to draw the drapes that he was standing right beside Emily to remind her of her position. In additional curiosities, his condescension and coldness in the most basic interactions. However, what made these disclosures even more painful was how needless they were. Andrew was sent troubled by the obligations among his siblings. He had no future. King. At best, he played a ceremonial role, even though he was indulgent at worst. Commanded all under him to adore him. Charlotte Briggs' disclosure of the truth, wasn't it simply about a man who loses his temper or infantile peculiar? It had to do with a pattern. A man who enjoyed making other people look bad, who did not view service as aid, but as a submission. Someone produced and surroundings so poisonous that even functioning became intolerable in the palace. And this was just the start. In fact, no, this was just the start. There Andrew had a certain quality that even Charlotte was aware, and it all began with extremely young age. From the start, Andrew's personality was distinct from his siblings, and not in a positive sense. Charles was reserved and scholarly, where Anne was obstinate but competent. Andrew seems to represent something distant, less innocent, As a young child, palace royal observers and employees noticed a pattern of brutality that pervaded his play. He didn't merely want attention. He made demands it, and he frequently discovered it by making and torturing individuals vulnerable to defend themselves. Among his first, the queen was being lured by amusements. Guards with stony faces. At a time when the majority of children may become less confident due to their imposing figure, Andrew strut past them, making fun of their stiff stance, making expressions in an attempt to lose their cool. He became more irate when they failed to respond, intensifying his behavior to compel them to recognizing him. This wasn't innocuous mischief. The boy thought that nor he was subject to the rules, not even the men's silent discipline in protecting his relatives. However, the actual brutality was demonstrated when he wasn't hostile to people. Additionally, animals took the brunt of his ice-spoiled temper. Records from the period explain how he kicked the household dogs, hitting and giggling when they yelled at the legs of horses, using sticks for his own amusement. The actions so appalled the royal grooms they once captured taking things into their own hands. They pushed the young prince's head initially into a heap of horse manure and buried him after covering him with fresh excrement on the squalor. He had so much pleasure in causing harm to others. It was hideous penalty, but one that they obviously believed he deserved. Furthermore, it wasn't the only when employees violated royal decorum they correct him. Another time, his persistently making fun of a palace footman prompted the man to strike back. He concluded up striking the boy so forcefully that he fled. His eye was dark. As soon as the footman resigned, anticipating disms right away, the queen Declinetto agreed to it. She even appeared to acknowledge that Andrew's actions had went so far as to be cruel that punishment was warranted. Even if it originated with one of her personal slaves, the nastiness wasn't limited to employees or creatures. Alongside his younger sibling, Andrew made every conversation a competition. He openly harassed him, pushing him, stealing pastries, and leaving bruises on him. It wasn't horseplay between brothers. It was dominance. Those who witnessed it saw a boy, drunk with the excitement of superiority, constantly having to prove that he had authority. While at school, his was followed like a smell by his notoriety. At Gordontown, and then at prep, his classmates called him Baby Grumpy because of his mockery for his malicious giggling at other people. He wasn't the endearing prince some people wished for it. The brat was him. Pampered, arrogant, and always making fun of. Despite his advanced age, his mind lacked maturity. It only got harder. There were rumors that he pulled at the dresses and zippers worn by female employees at royal gatherings, pressing their faces against meal while yelling for them to sniff the. It was a bully's actions, not a prince. While camping, he wastled to undermine other shelters. Fly sheets are torn down and thrown into rivers, abandoning his friends wet and wretched. For Andrew, it was just another joke. Two individuals who endured it. It was a humiliating experience. Employees, it was best summed up by his subordinates. He didn't use the courteous royal child's expected level of formality. Rather, he flung items to the ground and yelled commands filled with foul language for servants. Pick that up, who were used to punishment. To honor the boy's language was startling. They observed in him a spoiled child, not a wicked one, a little tyrant. When Andrew was old enough to don a uniform, reputation had already established within walls of the palace. He wasn't the most attractive and either the hard-edged heir like Charles, but competent Anne. He was the only employee dreaded handling. He showed off his connections with socialites and models, many of whom are hardly out thousands of them, and of their teens. At one point, his driver claimed to have seen almost 10 women enter and exit his location in Bangkok. It wasn't only it was embarrassing for the family, unsettling. Journalists started out liferring to him by his nickname, Randy Andy Wicktrap, for many years, diminishing the queenson of a tabloid joke. Even with any ideas murmured around the palace about his unwillingness to distance oneself from unsuitable companionship. Next came his notorious association with Jeffrey Epstein. Prior to Epstein's apprehension, they saw Andrew at his New York residences, his estate in the Caribbean, and his private aircraft. Images of Andrew strolling with Epstein following his initial incarceration prompted inquiries about his never able to respond. The issue wasn't limited to the association alone. He owned it boldness while other strong men they separated. And Andrew doubled down, referring to Epstein as a faithful friend and stating that he was not sorry about their connection, that one choice would sabotage him afterwards. Epstein, meanwhile, wasn't thinly a shadow looming over him. Behind palace walls, employees were gathering information about personal list of complaints. Housekeepers complain about being handled as in a medieval court, servants instead of workers in a contemporary home. The maid explained how Andrew made her sprint up 7 levels of stairs in order to draw the drapes a few inches from his. According to her, the abuse wasn't relenting, abusive, disparaging, and intended to shatter them. Another remembered him yelling about a small error with his stuffed animals, cautioning that nobody was only he was permitted to touch them. The way the Queen's crew was treated was so infamous that some started referring to him as in private, the Lord of Darkness. Instead than merely giving commands, Andrew dehumanized individuals. He was reported by gardeners scolding them for not having leaves. According to drivers, he would yell over a vehicle arriving 5 minutes late. A former Rockwire acknowledged that he was employed by Andrew as comparable to being a human punching bag. Buried for years, these accounts slowly made their way into the media, each creating a more ominous image than the previous one. The public witnessed hints of this when traveling abroad. He served as the trade ambassador for Britain. Intended to serve as the nation's spokesperson with. Instead, he was described in reports reprimanding foreign employees and handling waiters with disdain and requesting comforts comparable to those of dictators instead of diplomats. At one occasion, according to reports, he decreased 8th hotel staff to tears by yelling over his suite's temperature. Diplomats siccomping him acknowledged, thudding up Andrew's tantrums turned into part of the job. His personal life only stoked disgust, following Sarah Ferguson personal scandals, such as being apprehended evading payment in return for Andrew's introductions. The two appeared trapped in a harmful symbiosis connection. They shared a home, not divorced, but separated, holding on tough benefits of living as a royal while disregarding disgrace they caused to them, and they were accused by critics of employing their titles as protections while engaging in actions that would have ruined a commonplace reputations. By the early in the 2000s, Andrew was in decline. He wasn't revered like Charles, admired like or even accepted, as Edward did. Hugh was made fun of. His moniker changed from after that. Randy Andy will air Miles Andy. Showed how often he mistreated taxpayer funds for private aircraft and helicopters for short trips. Once more. The picture was damning. A male holding on to luxury while ignoring how she saw a struggling Britain. With disparities in income. Each year, more insiders from the palace broke their quiet. They spoke of a man who was fixated on with prestige, eager to be spotted with celebrities and completely defaced. Even in the familiar events, his conceit made him an ass. According to a story, Princess Diana declared Andrew to be the least clever among the Queen's sons, but the most entitled to. For once, even her detractors appeared to concur. The caution there were all the symptoms: entitlement, anger, poisonous alliances, and carelessness. However, nobody stopped him. With his mother's steadfast protection, Andrew slipped deeper into the realm of love. Shadows, shielded from the effects till the downfall of Epstein's universe, and pulled Andrew along with it. That's when the prince was not viewed by the world as a pampered royal, but as far as the ensuing scandal would not only ruin Andrew's standing, but also irreversibly damage his position inside the royal family. The pivotal moment arrived in 2010. Epstein Jeffrey had just been freed from jail for most powerful guys fled from him. Andrew took the opposite action. He was captured walking about Central Epstein and Park, giggling as though there was no scandal. That one picture went off like a bomb. For the initial, the public witnessed the Queen's son at that time strolling with a convicted sexual offender. Virginia followed. In her name became well known in 2015. Document. She charged Epstein with as an adolescent. She was trafficked, and she said that one of the males was Andrew. She had to have with it. She called having 3 encounters with him. Everyone when she stated that it was planned by Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's partner. The most incriminating evidence was a picture. Andrew holding a 17-year-old in his arms. In the background, Ghislaine is grinning. Denial was Andrew's answer. He asserted he didn't know her. He even proposed, though the shot was phony. Experts inspected it and discovered no indications of it. All the denial did was make him appear more in need. The castle went into a panic. Forward, they attempted to protect him for years, issuing bombastic claims and depending on the Queen's power to stifle criticism. However, the evidence continued to mount. Takeoff logs revealed that Andrew was traveling with Epstein. Witnesses said they saw them together in New York, London, and the Caribbean. Each detail delved deeper into regal facade. By 2019, the strain had reached a breaking point. Andrew concurred to participate in a BBC interview with the intention of delete his name. The subsequent events were one of the worst interviews in royal past. Excuses were made at the start. Therefore, for ridiculous, they made him a worldwide joke. He asserted that on the evening according to Jeffrey, she met him at a London act club. In fact, he had attended Ewoking's Pizza Express with his daughter. Like that, he repeated the detail. Was a tangible alibi. Not knowing how it sounded absurd, the internet blew up with memes, becoming a major charge into a circus. Next came the sweeting comment. According to Rue, Andrew was perspiring profusely while dancing with her. In response, Andrew said he had a medical illness that kept him from perspiring at the moment. The justification was thus strange, so improbable that it ruined his credibility right away. It was no longer merely denial, it was illusion. However, his worst moment was, rather than showing compassion for the victims of Epstein, Andrew concentrated on himself. Remaining with Epstein, he said when it was expedient for him to be released. He declared it an error, but promptly added that it was beneficial since it provided him with the opportunity to break off their friendship in individual. Millions of people watching thought it sounded as though he was justifying his proximity to a predator. The reaction was since the interview was referred to as a catastrophe, a rail accident, or a vehicle crash. Not even the Queen could keep him safe like this. Days later, Andrew declared Hugh was taking a break from royal responsibilities. It was living in exile. For the first time in contemporary times, a senior royal was essentially exiled due to scandal. The harm didn't end there. Charity cut ties to him. Universities took away his honorary roles. Military units ejected him from their group. Andrew had no longer the preferred son of the Quinto, a man who was poisonous to all establishments as Ciasihua with the monarchy. However, Jupist ahead, 2021 saw her submit a civil action in the US accused Andrew of sexual assault. Andrew's attorneys made every effort to obtain it, rejected, claiming that she had no case. Technicalities shielded him, and that the charges were untrue. Nothing worked. A judge decided that the case may proceed to stand trial. That meant one thing to Andrew. Something. He would compete against Jaffarin in court or reach a private settlement. Early on, Andrew settled in 2022. He gave Dupree £12 million. According to reports, the palace maintained that it wasn't an acknowledgement of guilt, but it was visible to the public in a different way. It appeared to many that he had purchased his way out of responsibility. Even worse, inquiries whirled around the source of the funds. Some believed that the Queen herself had covertly financed the agreement to safeguard the monarchy. Prior to Prince Philip Sudanly, Andrew was the only person in the world pursuing his siblings. He was banned during Queen's Platinum Jubilee, avoiding showing up on the balcony. At her, he lost his military uniform at his funeral. Clothing, positioned clumsily as his siblings wore theirs. Every second waste response to everyone's prayers were he injured. It wasn't that, though when Charles assumed control, Andrew was deprived of all remaining honest military titles. He was informed that he would not can longer stand in for the crown in any official ability.